The air in the grand atrium of the Meridian Tower did not smell like victory. It smelled of ozone, burnt coffee, and the sharp, metallic tang of panic. 300 people stood frozen in a circle that had formed spontaneously around the base of the central glass elevator shaft. Silence was heavy, pressing against eardrums, broken only by the rhythmic mechanical clicking of a security camera rotating on its mount, and the distant, muffled wail of sirens that seemed to be getting louder but never quite arriving. In the center of this human amphitheater stood Alara Vance. To the untrained eye, she was invisible. She wore a uniform that was 2 sizes too large, the gray fabric swallowing her slight frame, the name tag pinned crookedly to her chest reading simply, Maintenance. Her hair, a chaotic storm of dark curls, was pulled back into a messy bun that seemed ready to unravel at any moment. She held a tablet in one hand and a multi-tool in the other, her knuckles white from the grip. She was trembling, not from fear, or so it appeared to the crowd, but from the sheer physical effort of holding herself still while the world around her spun into chaos. Opposite her stood Julian Thorne, the vice president of operations for Meridian Global Logistics. Julian was a man carved from marble and ambition. His suit was tailored to within an inch of its life, his tie a perfect Windsor knot, his hair swept back with geometric precision. He held a smartphone in one hand, recording the scene, his face a mask of performative outrage. Behind him stood 2 private security guards, their hands resting casually on their belts, eyes locked on Alara as if she were a dangerous animal that had slipped its leash. The crowd whispered. The whispers were not kind. They spoke of incompetence, of negligence, of the danger of letting people like that handle critical infrastructure. They judged her by the grease stain on her sleeve, by the scuffed boots, by the way she avoided eye contact with the camera lenses. They saw a janitor who had broken something they could not understand. They did not see the woman who had calculated the structural load of the building's emergency braking system in her head 3 seconds ago. They did not see the mind that was currently running 4 different simulation models to prevent a catastrophic failure that would kill everyone in the lobby. Alara took a breath. It was shallow, controlled. She looked at the digital display above the elevator doors. The numbers were flickering, erratic. Car 4 was stuck between the 40th and 41st floors. But that was not the problem. The problem was the counterweight. The primary cable had snapped, a rare 1 in a million fatigue fracture that had gone undetected during the last inspection because the inspector had been rushed, just like everyone else in this building. The secondary safety brakes had engaged, but they were overheating. If they failed, the car would drop 40 stories. Inside were 12 people. Among them was the CEO's daughter. And among them was Julian Thorne's biggest rival for the upcoming promotion. The stakes were not just human, they were political. And Alara Vance, the woman who cleaned the break room microwaves and unclogged the third-floor restrooms, was the only person in the building who understood why the brakes were failing. She knew because she had designed the override protocol 10 years ago under a different name in a different life. But here, now, she was just the help, and the help was not allowed to speak unless spoken to. Julian stepped forward, his voice booming through the atrium, amplified by the acoustics of the glass dome. "Step away from the panel," he commanded, his tone dripping with condescension. "You have done enough damage for one day, Vance. Security, remove her, now." The guards moved in, their boots clicking on the polished marble. Alara did not move. She kept her eyes on the tablet. "Mr. Thorne," she said, her voice quiet but steady, cutting through the murmurs. "If you touch that manual override lever, you will disengage the hydraulic dampeners. The car will freefall." Julian laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound. "You don't even know what a hydraulic dampener is, Vance. You mop floors. You do not engineer elevators. Step away." The crowd murmured in agreement. A woman in a business suit shook her head, muttering about liability. A man in a construction helmet crossed his arms, looking disappointed. They wanted order. They wanted the authority figure to restore control. They did not realize that the authority figure was about to kill 12 people. This story begins not with the crash, but with the judgment. It begins with the way we look at people and decide, in a fraction of a second, what they are worth. We build hierarchies based on titles, on suits, on the clarity of our speech and the cleanliness of our hands. We assume that competence wears a badge and that incompetence wears a rag. But sometimes the most dangerous thing in the room is not the machine that is breaking, but the ego that refuses to listen to the person who knows how to fix it. Today, we are going to walk through the 30 minutes that changed everything for Alara Vance. We are going to see how prejudice can blind us to salvation, and how truth, when it finally arrives, does not knock politely, it kicks down the door. If you have ever been underestimated, if you have ever been silenced when you knew you were right, this story is for you. Stay with us. The truth is coming, and it is more powerful than you think. Before we dive deeper into the mechanics of this crisis, take a moment to subscribe to the channel. We bring you stories of hidden heroes and quiet justice every week, and your support helps us keep these narratives alive. Click that button and join a community that values substance over status. To understand why Alara Vance was standing in the center of the Meridian Tower atrium, trembling not from fear but from restraint, we must go back 6 months. The Meridian Tower was the crown jewel of downtown Seattle, a 70-story spike of glass and steel that pierced the cloud layer. It was a monument to efficiency, to speed, to the relentless forward motion of global commerce. Inside, thousands of people worked in cubicles that looked out over the Puget Sound, moving money, data, and goods across the planet. It was a place where time was money and mistakes were expensive. Alara Vance had been hired as part of the night cleaning crew 3 months prior. She was 42 years old, though she looked older, her face lined with the fatigue of a life lived in the shadows. She arrived at 10:00 p.m. and left at 6:00 a.m. She spoke to no one. She kept her head down. She wore her uniform like armor, hiding the intelligence that burned behind her eyes. Her supervisor, a man named Gary, liked her because she was quiet. Alara doesn't ask questions, Gary would tell the regional manager. She just does the work, no drama, no attitude. It was a compliment in the twisted logic of the service industry. Alara's lack of questions was interpreted as a lack of curiosity, which was interpreted as a lack of threat. She was safe, she was invisible, and that was exactly what she wanted. But invisibility has a cost. It means that when you speak, no one hears you. It means that when you warn, no one listens. It means that your expertise is erased before it can be offered. Alara had tried once early in her tenure. She had noticed a vibration in the HVAC system on the 20th floor, a harmonic resonance that suggested a bearing was about to fail. She had written a note to facilities management. The note had been thrown away. 2 weeks later, the bearing failed, flooding the executive suites with water. The incident was blamed on unforeseen wear and tear. Alara said nothing. She learned her lesson. Silence was safer. Silence was survival. But silence is a heavy burden to carry, especially when you know how things work. Alara had not always been a cleaner. 10 years ago, she had been Dr. Alara Vance, lead systems engineer for Aerodynamic Solutions, a firm contracted by the city to upgrade the public transit infrastructure. She had been brilliant, driven, and respected. Then came the accident, not an accident of machinery, but of life. Her younger brother, Leo, had been injured in a car crash caused by a faulty traffic signal, a signal Alara had flagged for repair, but which had been ignored due to budget cuts. Leo had survived, but he was paralyzed. Alara had taken leave to care for him. The leave had turned into resignation. The resignation had turned into a gap in her resume that grew wider and darker with each passing year. When she returned to the workforce, the tech industry had moved on. Her skills were considered legacy. Her age was considered a liability. Her need for flexible hours to care for Leo was considered an inconvenience. So she took the job at Meridian. She took the job that required no degree, no references, no background check beyond a basic criminal record scan. She took the job that allowed her to pay for Leo's care without having to explain why she had disappeared from the professional world. She carried her past with her, not as a badge of honor, but as a secret shame. She hid her textbooks in her locker. She solved complex calculus problems on scrap paper during her breaks, then crumpled them up and threw them away. She watched the engineers in their glass offices, discussing problems she could solve in her sleep, and she felt an ache in her chest that was sharper than any physical pain. It was the ache of wasted potential. It was the grief of a self that had been buried alive. But she endured. She endured for Leo. She endured because she had no other choice. And so she became invisible. She became the woman who emptied the trash bins and wiped down the countertops. She became the woman who was judged by her appearance, by her uniform, RM by her silence, until the day the elevator broke. The culture of the Meridian Tower was one of aggressive visibility. You had to be seen to be valued. You had to speak loudly to be heard. Julian Thorne was the embodiment of this culture. He was a man who believed that leadership was a performance and that he was the star of the show. He walked through the halls with an entourage of junior associates who nodded at his every word. He held meetings that lasted hours and accomplished nothing, but looked impressive on calendar invites. He was charming to those above him and cruel to those below him. He viewed the maintenance staff as obstacles, inconveniences that cluttered his pristine environment. He had never learned Alara's last name until the day of the incident, and even then, he had only learned it because he needed someone to blame. Julian's power over Alara was absolute. He controlled her schedule. He controlled her evaluations. He could fire her with a single email, and he knew it. He used this power subtly in small ways that added up to a lifetime of humiliation. He would leave messes intentionally, knowing she would have to clean them. He would criticize her work in front of others, pointing out a streak on a window or a dust mote on a desk, smiling as if it were a joke. He was testing her, pushing her, seeing how much she would take, and Alara took it. She took it because she needed the paycheck. She took it because she was tired. She took it because she believed deep down that perhaps she deserved it. Perhaps she had failed. Perhaps she was no longer the brilliant engineer she had once been. Perhaps she was just the cleaner. This belief was the chain that bound her, and Julian Thorne held the key. If you are enjoying this deep dive into the psychology of workplace dynamics and the hidden strengths of those we overlook, please take a second to hit the like button. It helps us reach more people who need to hear this message. Your engagement tells us that you value stories that challenge the status quo. And while you're there, check out the pinned comment below. We've started a discussion about times when you've seen quiet competence save the day. We'd love to hear your stories. Now, let's return to the atrium. The tension is rising, the sirens are closer, and Alara Vance is running out of time. The crisis began at 2:14 p.m. It was a Tuesday. The building was at peak occupancy. The elevators were running at full capacity, shuttling hundreds of people between the lobby and the upper offices. Car 4 was descending from the 50th floor, carrying a group of investors and the CEO's daughter, Sarah. Suddenly, there was a sound, not a crash, but a snap. A high-pitched twang like a guitar string breaking echoed through the shaft. The car jerked violently. The lights flickered and died, replaced by the dim glow of the emergency backup. The passengers screamed. The car shuddered, then stopped. It hung in the void, suspended by the secondary safety brakes. But the brakes were not designed to hold the weight indefinitely. They were friction-based, and friction generates heat. In the control room, 3 floors down, the alarms began to blare. Red lights flashed on the main console. The chief engineer, a man named David, stared at the screen in confusion. "What's happening?" he shouted. "Why are the brakes engaging?" He typed furiously, trying to reset the system, but the system was locked out. The safety protocol had triggered automatically, preventing any remote override to ensure the car didn't drop. It was a standard feature, but it was also a trap. Because the brakes were overheating, and if they failed, there was no backup, David called for maintenance. "Send someone to the shaft, manual override, now." Gary, the maintenance supervisor, was in the break room. He panicked. He didn't know how to perform a manual override. It was a specialized procedure, one that required knowledge of the hydraulic systems. He looked around the room. The other technicians were out on calls. There was only one person available. Alara. She was mopping the hallway outside. Gary ran to her. "Vance, get to the atrium. The elevator is stuck. Go down there and—" "I don't know, just help." He didn't give her instructions. He didn't give her tools. He just pushed her toward the stairs. "Go, hurry." Alara dropped her mop. She didn't ask questions. She ran. She knew what was happening. She had heard the snap. She had felt the vibration in the floorboards. She knew that the secondary brakes were failing. She knew that the manual override was located in the atrium at the base of the shaft. And she knew that if she didn't act correctly, 12 people would die. She ran down the stairs, her heart pounding, her mind racing. She wasn't thinking about her uniform. She wasn't thinking about Julian Thorne. She was thinking about the physics of the situation. Mass gravity, friction, time. She had 90 seconds before the brakes failed. Maybe less. When Alara burst into the atrium, the scene was already chaotic. Security had cordoned off the area. People were crying. Julian Thorne was there, shouting into his phone, trying to manage the PR disaster before it had even happened. He saw Alara and sneered. "What are you doing here?" he yelled. "Get back! This is a restricted area." Alara ignored him. She ran to the control panel embedded in the wall near the elevator doors. It was a small, unassuming box labeled Emergency Maintenance Access. Most people didn't even know it existed. Alara pulled her multi-tool from her pocket. She didn't hesitate. She unscrewed the cover plate. Julian marched over. "Stop! You are not authorized to touch that." He grabbed her arm. Alara shook him off, her eyes wild. "Let me go," she shouted. It was the first time anyone had heard her raise her voice. The crowd fell silent. Julian was stunned. He hadn't expected resistance. He hadn't expected anything from her. "You're going to make it worse," he spat. "You're a janitor. You don't know what you're doing." Alara looked at him, really looked at him for the first time. She saw the fear in his eyes, the fear of losing control, the fear of being irrelevant, and she felt a surge of pity. But she didn't have time for pity. She had work to do. She opened the panel. Inside was a complex array of wires and levers. To the untrained eye, it was gibberish. To Alara, it was a language. She saw the hydraulic line. She saw the pressure gauge. It was in the red. The brakes were slipping. She had to engage the auxiliary clamp, but the clamp was rusted. It hadn't been tested in years. She had to force it. She inserted her multi-tool into the mechanism. She leveraged it against the frame. She pushed. Her muscles strained. The tool bent. The crowd gasped. Julian laughed nervously. "Look at her," he said to the security guards. "She's destroying company property. Stop her." The guards stepped forward. Alara didn't stop. She couldn't. She knew that if she stopped, the car would drop. She pushed harder. Her hands blistered. Her breath came in short gasps, and then with a loud clang, the lever clicked into place. The hydraulic pressure stabilized. The car stopped shaking. The passengers inside were safe, for now. Alara slumped against the wall, exhausted. She had done it. She had saved them. She looked up, expecting relief, expecting thanks. Instead, she saw Julian Thorne's face twist into a mask of rage. We often think of heroism as a grand gesture, a moment of glory. But true heroism is often quiet. It is the decision to act when no one is watching. It is the willingness to risk everything for the sake of others, even when those others despise you. Alara Vance had just saved 12 lives. She had performed a feat of engineering precision under extreme pressure. And yet as she stood there, covered in sweat and grease, she felt no triumph. She felt only dread. Because she knew that in the eyes of Julian Thorne, she had not saved the day. She had violated protocol. She had touched equipment she was not authorized to touch. She had embarrassed him in front of his peers. And in the corporate world, embarrassment is a sin that cannot be forgiven. Before we continue, if this story is resonating with you, please consider sharing it with a friend or colleague who might appreciate a narrative about integrity and resilience. Stories like this remind us that dignity is not given. It is earned, often in the most difficult circumstances. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter, where the consequences of Alara's actions begin to unfold. The injustice is just beginning, but so is the revelation. Julian Thorne did not see a savior. He saw an insubordinate employee. He saw a threat to his authority. He saw opportunity to assert control. He walked over to Alara, who was still catching her breath. "You," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You are fired, effective immediately. Security, escort her out, confiscate her badge, and call legal. I want her sued for damages to that panel." The crowd murmured again. Some looked shocked. Others looked relieved. The problem was solved. The troublemaker was removed. Order was restored. Alara looked at Julian. She wanted to explain. She wanted to tell him about the rusted clamp, about the overheating brakes, about the fact that if she hadn't acted, the car would have fallen. But she looked at the faces of the crowd. They were not listening. They were judging. They saw a fired janitor. They did not see a hero. Alara stood up. Her legs shook. She handed her badge to the security guard. She did not argue. She did not cry. She simply turned and walked away. As she exited the atrium, she heard Julian speaking to the cameras. "We take safety seriously," he said. "That is why we have strict protocols, and that is why we cannot tolerate reckless behavior no matter how well-intentioned." He was spinning the narrative. He was making himself the hero. He was making Alara the villain, and the worst part was it was working. The news crews were already arriving. They were filming Julian. They were ignoring Alara. She disappeared into the service elevator alone. The doors closed, and in the darkness, she finally allowed herself to cry, not for herself, but for the 12 people in the car who would never know that she had saved them, and for the world that refused to see her. The injustice of the moment was palpable. It hung in the air like smoke. Alara had acted with perfect competence. She had saved lives, and she had been punished for it. Why? Because she was poor, because she was unseen, because she did not fit the mold of the hero. This is the core of the story. It is not just about an elevator. It is about the systems we build that protect the powerful and crush the vulnerable. It is about the bias that blinds us to talent. And it is about the moment when that bias is challenged. Alara Vance was down. She was fired. She was humiliated. But she was not defeated, because she had something Julian Thorne did not have. She had the truth. And the truth, as we will see, has a way of coming out. As we move into the next phase of this story, the stakes are about to rise. Julian Thorne thinks he has won. He thinks he has silenced the problem, but he has made a critical error. He has underestimated Alara Vance, and he has forgotten one crucial detail. One person in that elevator car saw everything. One person knows the truth, and that person is not just anyone. That person is the wounded high-status figure we mentioned earlier. The CEO's daughter, Sarah. She was in the car. She saw Alara's face through the glass doors before they closed. She saw the determination. She saw the skill, and she remembers. Please take a moment to reflect on what you've heard so far. Have you ever witnessed someone being treated unfairly because of their position or appearance? If so, leave a comment below describing that moment. Your stories help build a community of awareness and empathy. We read every comment, and your perspectives enriched the conversation. Now, let's prepare for the arrival of authority. The game is about to change. Julian Thorne is about to learn that you cannot bury the truth forever. Alara walked out of the Meridian Tower into the rainy Seattle afternoon. She had no job, no income, no reference. She had only her pride, and even that felt battered. She walked to the bus stop, her head down. She thought about Leo. How would she pay for his care? How would she explain this? She felt a profound sense of failure, not because she had failed to save the people in the elevator, but because she had failed to protect herself. She had let them define her. She had let them strip her of her dignity. She sat on the bench, the rain soaking through her uniform. She closed her eyes, and then her phone buzzed. It was a text message from an unknown number. I saw what you did. Meet me at St. Mary's Hospital, room 402, come alone. S. Alara stared at the screen. S. Sarah, the CEO's daughter. Why was she at the hospital, and why did she want to meet? Alara hesitated. It could be a trap, it could be Julian, but something in the message felt urgent, authentic. She stood up. She wiped the rain from her face, and she began to walk toward the hospital. She didn't know what awaited her there, but she knew that her story was not over. The first act was complete. The humiliation was done. Now the reckoning would begin. St. Mary's Hospital was a stark contrast to the gleaming sterility of the Meridian Tower. It was older, warmer, filled with the scent of antiseptic and lavender. Alara Vance walked through the sliding doors, her wet uniform leaving a trail of droplets on the linoleum floor. She felt out of place, not just because of her attire, but because of her state of mind. She was a woman stripped of her identity, wandering into a space of healing while carrying a wound of her own. She found room 402 easily. The door was slightly ajar. Inside, sitting in a wheelchair by the window, was Sarah Jenkins, the CEO's daughter. She looked pale, her arm in a sling, but her eyes were sharp, alert. She was 24 years old, but in that moment she looked much older. She had seen death hanging in the balance, and she had seen the person who had held it back. Alara stopped in the doorway. You asked for me? She said, her voice rough. Sarah turned her wheelchair. Close the door, she said. Alara did. The room was quiet, save for the hum of the medical equipment. Sarah studied Alara. My father wants to sue you, she said bluntly. Alara flinched. I know. Julian Thorne is writing a report, Sarah continued. He's saying you tampered with the safety systems, that you caused the malfunction. He's claiming you were negligent. Alara felt a cold knot form in her stomach. That's a lie, she whispered. I saved you. I know, Sarah said. I was there. I saw the brack. Gauge, I saw the pressure dropping. I saw you engage the clamp. I know what you did. Then why? Alara started, but she couldn't finish the sentence. Why was she here? Why was Sarah stopping it? Sarah sighed. Because my father is weak. He listens to Julian. Julian has been with the company for 15 years. He brings in millions in contracts. My father is afraid of losing him, and he is afraid of the liability. If he admits that a janitor saved the day, he admits that his engineering team failed. He admits that his safety protocols are flawed. It's easier to blame you. It's cleaner. Alara felt a surge of anger. So I'm just collateral damage. No, Sarah said firmly. You're the key. I recorded it. She held up her phone. I was live streaming to my friends before the crash. The video shows everything. It shows Julian trying to stop you. It shows you saving us. It shows the truth. Alara stared at the phone. Why give it to me? Because I can't release it, Sarah said. If I do, Julian will claim I'm biased. He'll say I'm protecting my friend. He'll spin it. But if you release it, if you go to the press, it's undeniable. But you need more than a video. You need proof of your competence. You need to show them that you didn't just get lucky. You need to show them that you are an engineer. Alara shook her head. I'm not an engineer anymore. I'm a cleaner. No, Sarah said. You're Dr. Alara Vance. I looked you up. Aerodynamic Solutions, lead systems engineer. You designed the braking algorithm for the city's maglev trains. Why are you cleaning floors? The question hung in the air, heavy and painful. Alara looked away. She couldn't answer. Not yet. The shame was too fresh. Sarah softened. It doesn't matter why. What matters is that you are, and Julian Thorne is about to find out. She handed Alara a USB drive. This contains the video, and this, she handed her a folder, contains the maintenance logs for the elevator. I hacked into the server, don't ask how. The logs show that the primary cable had a known defect. It was flagged 3 months ago. Julian signed off on the inspection without checking it. He cut corners. He's been cutting corners for years. This isn't just about you, Alara. It's about negligence, corporate manslaughter, and you have the evidence to prove it. Alara took the folder. Her hands trembled. This was it, the weapon she needed. But using it meant exposing herself. It meant stepping back into the light. It meant revealing the past she had tried to bury. Was she ready? Sarah looked at her. You don't have to do this alone. I'm with you. My father is with me. Once he sees this, he'll have no choice, but you have to be the one to present it. You have to be the one to stand up. Are you ready? Alara took a deep breath. She thought of Leo. She thought of the years of silence. She thought of the sneer on Julian's face, and she nodded. Yes, she said, I'm ready. If you are feeling the momentum shift in this story, please hit that like button. It's a small action, but it signals to us that you are invested in Alara's journey. We are approaching the climax, the moment where the tables turn. And trust us, you won't want to miss what happens next. Also, if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. We have more stories of justice and redemption coming your way, and we'd love to have you with us for the ride. Now, let's return to the Meridian Tower. The boardroom is waiting. The next morning, the Meridian Tower was buzzing with rumor. Julian Thorne had called an emergency meeting of the board of directors. He intended to present his findings on the incident. He planned to recommend the termination of Alara Vance and the implementation of stricter access controls for maintenance staff. He felt confident. He had the narrative. He had the power. He walked into the boardroom, a sleek circular chamber on the 70th floor with a view of the entire city. The board members were seated around the table. Among them was Arthur Jenkins, the CEO and Sarah's father. Arthur looked tired. He had spent the night worrying. He loved his daughter, but he loved his company too. He was torn. Julian began his presentation. He used charts and graphs. He spoke of liability mitigation and brand protection. He painted Alara as a rogue element, a danger to the organization. We cannot allow unauthorized personnel to interfere with critical systems, he said, his voice smooth and convincing. It sets a dangerous precedent. We must prioritize protocol over individual heroics. The board members nodded. They were businessmen. They understood risk. They understood order. Julian was giving them what they wanted, a simple solution to a complex problem. Blame the worker, fix the rule, move on. But then the doors opened. Alara Vance walked in. She was not wearing her uniform. She was wearing a simple blouse and trousers, clothes she had bought years ago for interviews she never got. She looked different, cleaner, sharper. Her hair was down, framing her face. She walked with her head high. Behind her walked Sarah Jenkins, pushing her wheelchair, and behind them walked Arthur Jenkins. The room fell silent. Julian froze. What is the meaning of this? He demanded. Security. Sit down, Julian, Arthur said, his voice quiet but firm. Alara has something to say. Julian looked at Arthur, confused. Sir, she is fired. She is trespassing. She is a guest, Arthur said, and she is an engineer, or so I am told. He looked at Alara. Is it true? Did you design the maglev braking system? Alara looked at Julian. She saw the fear in his eyes, the same fear she had seen in the atrium, but this time she did not look away. Yes, she said. I did. The reveal landed like a bomb. The board members exchanged glances. Maglev braking systems were cutting-edge technology. Designed by a cleaner, it was impossible, and yet there she stood, calm, composed, competent. Sarah rolled forward. And here is the proof, she said, placing the USB drive on the table. And here, she placed the folder, are the logs showing Julian's negligence. Julian paled. This is fabricated, he stammered. She's lying. Play the video, Arthur said. The screen on the wall lit up. The footage from the atrium played. It showed the chaos. It showed Julian grabbing Alara's arm. It showed Alara ignoring him, focusing on the panel. It showed the precision of her movements, the speed, the confidence. And then it showed the brake gauge stabilizing. It showed the car stopping. It showed the passengers cheering. And it showed Julian screaming at her to stop. The silence in the boardroom was absolute. No one moved, no one breathed. Julian stood alone, exposed. His lies lay in ruins around him. Alara stepped forward. The primary cable had a fatigue fracture, she said, her voice clear and professional. It was flagged in the March inspection. Julian signed off on it without verification. The secondary brakes were overheating due to lack of maintenance. I engaged the auxiliary clamp to stabilize the load. If I had not acted, the car would have fallen. I did not violate protocol. I upheld the spirit of safety, which is the only protocol that matters. She looked at the board. I am not asking for my job back. I am asking for accountability, for the 12 people in that car, for the integrity of this building, and for the truth. Arthur Jenkins looked at Julian. Is this true? He asked. Julian tried to speak, but no words came out. He looked at the board, hoping for support, but he found none. They were looking at him with disgust, not because he had made a mistake, but because he had lied, because he had tried to destroy a woman who had saved his daughter, because he had valued his image over human life. Julian, Arthur said, you are terminated, effective immediately. Security will escort you out. And we will be launching a full internal investigation into your conduct. You will be held liable for any damages. Julian Thorne was led out of the boardroom by 2 security guards. He did not look back. He did not speak. He was a man who had lost everything, not because of a machine, but because of his own hubris. He had judged Alara by her appearance. He had underestimated her, and in doing so, he had destroyed himself. The board turned to Alara. "Dr. Vance," Arthur said, "we owe you an apology, a profound one. We would like to offer you a position, head of safety engineering, with full authority to overhaul our maintenance protocols, and a salary that reflects your worth." Alara looked at him. She felt a surge of emotion, vindication, relief, joy, but also caution. "I have conditions," she said. "First, a full audit of all safety systems. Second, a review of the hiring practices for maintenance staff. We need to value skills, not just uniforms. Third, I want a fund established for the families of workers who are injured on the job. And fourth," she paused, "I want my name cleared publicly." Arthur nodded. "Done, all of it." The confrontation was over. The justice was served. But the story was not just about punishing Julian. It was about restoring Alara. It was about recognizing her value. It was about changing the culture of the Meridian Tower. In the weeks that followed, Alara Vance became a legend, not just in the building, but in the industry. Her story was picked up by the news, not as a scandal, but as a testament to hidden talent. She was interviewed. She spoke about the importance of humility, about the danger of bias, about the need to listen to everyone, regardless of their title. She returned to the atrium not as a cleaner, but as an engineer. She walked past the spot where she had been humiliated. She looked at the elevator panel. It had been repaired, properly. She smiled. She had won, not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever been overlooked, for everyone who had ever been silenced. She had proven that competence is not defined by appearance. That dignity is not granted by authority. That truth, no matter how deeply buried, will always rise to the surface. If this resolution brought you satisfaction, please consider leaving a comment below. Tell us what part of Alara's journey resonated most with you. Was it her silence, her action, her vindication? Your thoughts help us create better stories. And don't forget to share this video with someone who needs a reminder that they are seen, they are valued, and they are capable. You never know who might need to hear that today. Alara's life changed. She moved Leo to a better facility. She bought a small house with a garden. She went back to school not to learn new skills, but to teach. She became a mentor to young engineers, especially women, telling them to never let anyone define their worth. She kept her multi-tool on her desk, a reminder of where she had come from, and she never forgot the lesson of the Meridian Tower, that the most powerful person in the room is not always the one with the loudest voice. Sometimes it is the one with the quietest competence. Julian Thorne disappeared from the public eye. He faced lawsuits. He lost his reputation. He became a cautionary tale, a reminder that arrogance is a fragile shield, and that when you judge a book by its cover, you might miss the story that saves your life. The moral of this story is simple yet profound. Humility is not weakness, it is strength. Integrity is not optional, it is essential. And prejudice is not just unfair, it is dangerous. It blinds us to the solutions we need. It silences the voices that matter. We must learn to look deeper, to listen closer, to value substance over status, because you never know who is standing in the shadows waiting to save the day. As we conclude this narrative, we want to thank you for joining us on this journey. Stories like Alara's remind us that justice is possible, that redemption is real, and that everyone deserves to be seen for who they truly are. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the channel. We have many more tales of injustice and vindication to share. And remember, in a world that often judges by appearance, be the one who looks for competence, be the one who listens, be the one who stands up for the truth. Thank you for watching, thank you for listening, and thank you for believing in the power of a good story. Until next time, stay curious, stay kind, and keep whispering the code.